If summer heat and activity left your lawn with bare patches and thin spots, then get Scott's Turf Builder Grass Seed. Fall's cool air and warm soil make it the best time to grow grass. Use Turf Builder Grass Seed to grow thicker, greener grass, guaranteed. It contains Scott's exclusive Water Smart Plus coating that absorbs 2 times more water than uncoated seeds. Feeds to jumpstart growth and protect seedlings against disease. And Scott's is the official lawn care company of Major League Baseball. Fall's the best time to grow seed and repair your yard. Pick up a bag of Scott's Turf Builder Grass Seed today. This is a Scott's Yard.
Want an easy way to see if you could save money on car insurance? Geico gives you 3. Call 1-800-947-AUTO. Go online to geico.com or stop by the Geico office nearest you. 3 ways you could save 15% or more.
Mike Golic Jr. is here. Timmy Kurkjian's on the way. Stu Gotts, Adam Schefter, and Rob Ninkovich. All still to come on this extraordinarily busy day. And I just, for the first time this morning, had a moment to open up my mentions on Twitter. And Amanda tweeted, "My husband left ESPN on last night, and I woke to the hilarity of listening to Mike Golic Jr., ESPN Golic, and ESPN Greeny debating potatoes and watermelon trees." Again, I didn't know. I didn't say that I thought they grew on trees.
Yeah, you did.
I said, if it's a fruit, doesn't it have to grow on a tree? Well, I thought that was the definition of a fruit.
So, hence, you thought watermelons grew on trees.
I made that assumption.
Yeah, you did.
I didn't claim to have ever seen one. I get it would have to be a pretty big, sturdy tree.
I just like that Amanda put me first in the billing on that one. 18 years later, and you guys still aren't getting that respect.
That's what you locked onto on that.
Oh, yeah, listen, I'm very self-interested, if nothing else.
And then Donnie tweets, a potato is classified as a vegetable, but is a flowering plant. And Brian tweets, I'm a potato farmer. It is a vegetable.
Thank you.
I don't think a potato is a vegetable.
How are you going to describe?
How am I saying that? This is Brian and Donnie are
Pull it
tweeting
up
this.
here.
The potato is a starchy tuberous crop from the perennial nightshade Solanum tuberosum. The word potato may refer either to the plant itself or the blah, blah, blah. Get to the part where it says whether it's a vegetable or not.
I mean, the farmer just said that, like, you came and asked us about the hit with Danny Trevathan because we're football guys.
Yeah.
And so we could help you out with that. So now you're going to deny potato guy his day in the sun?
Anyone can tweet me and say, I'm a potato farmer.
So now you're saying he's lying. Now you've accused, what's his name?
Brian
of lying.
Well, listen, no Brian could possibly be lying, right? I mean, obviously, I don't know. My point is, I don't know that it's a vegetable.
Don't let the liberal media tell you how to feel about potatoes.
I'm still not 100% sure.
See what you millennials are doing?
I'm still not 100% sure that it's a vegetable, but that's a different discussion for a different day. We have got a ton of reaction to so many different things on the table, but we never managed to make it to perhaps the story that had the most attention yesterday. So let's get to that. Let's make this Straight Talk. Brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. We'll play you the entirety of the exchange, meaning the question and the response from Cam Newton yesterday. Cam and the Panthers are off to a 3-1 start. He's doing his weekly, session with the media. Yesterday, he's being asked a question about his receiver, who's off to a good start, Delvin Funchess. They've had some good connection early in this year, and you will hear what ensues.
Yeah, I know you take a lot of pride in seeing your receivers play well. Devin Funchess has seemed to really embrace the physicality of his routes and getting those extra yards. Does that give you a little bit of an enjoyment to see him kind of truck sticking people out there?
It's funny to hear a female talk about routes. Like, it's funny. But fun is coming along, man. We're gonna. This is a big game for him because of him being from Detroit, and I know he wants this win extremely bad.
So he went on from there and talked about
Funchess, yeah.
Obviously, the part that everyone is focused on is that. And for those of you who are listening on ESPN Radio who may not have seen it, I do think seeing his facial expression along with it does further your understanding of why people were so offended by this. The woman asking the question is Jordan, is it Rodrigue?
Rodrigue.
From the Charlotte Observer. Yeah. She is one of the 2 beat writers that newspaper has covering the Panthers. Guys, your thoughts?
I heard you this morning, Mike. Echo off what you were saying this morning. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, it's interesting here because I think the tendency right away is to do the easy thing and vilify Cam Newton for this and come down on him really hard. There's some inconsistencies with him for a guy that's was just talking about why he held the fist up in the end zone of that game and trying to represent a cause of showing that Black Lives Matter, that inconsistency of saying, don't put me in a box while I put you in a box, and even if it's just in an implied way like this. But I don't think it necessarily has to come to vilification, because listen, I'm not going to be the one to do it because I'm imperfect here too. This is something you battle against. And to the point of the reaction we've seen from players and from just everyday people, this is a place that is still, this is an idea that still prevails. Like, you talk to the women that work in our industry, and I talked to Amina Kimes is someone who I consider a friend here and who's one of the, best, brightest women we have working at this company, and who said the other day, I've met with plenty of athletes throughout the course of writing and doing these things, guys who appreciate, who respect me, and who love talking X's and O's with me. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that what Cam said is what I hear every day in my mentions. And so it's pointing out, to me, it kind of gives a face to that idea that, like, this isn't something that you can excuse away as troll behavior or anything like that. Like, these are real people that still harbor a lot of backwards beliefs like this. And when you're a high-profile figure, when you're a public figure like Cam, you're going to have to answer for that. But to just say he needs to pick his words more carefully is sort of disingenuous to that idea. Like, him saying that is basically saying he forgot his audience. Like, if he was making this joke in the locker room around other places, it's cool. And I think the whole point should be, like, it's more worthwhile to look at him and say, no, like, there's reasons why that's kind of wrong and why you wouldn't want that applied to the women that you love in your life. Because I'm sure Cam has women. I know plenty of guys in sports that have women in their life that they love and revere and respect and can still hold and operate a lot of these backwards restrictive views on what women are capable of that ultimately undermine this. So I don't know what Cam's ability to change and understand and adapt are. That's a story for another day. But in general, I think the idea of saying, man, listen, this is why this is wrong and this is what we can do better here are more productive than just coming down and saying, oh, this is bad, this is easy, why would he do this?
Yeah, I mean, I heard John Anderson on SportsCenter last night say it was like a caveman mentality. We're at one of the first tweets this morning when you teased we were going to talk about it was Cam's quote was fine. Probably has never had a woman coach. The idea was foreign to him. People need to stop having thin skin. And that's what a lot of what I saw last night. Let's quit being so politically correct, or why does everybody have thin skin when he says something like this? And I guess my thought on it is, and I heard you this morning when you were talking even more about it, saying that, listen, there were other football players saying there was no issue, with what he said. So you wonder in the locker room, you don't want to use the broad brush and say all players still feel that way, but certainly some do. My thought, again, and it helps being 54 years old and going through a lot of this, when Chris was growing up, their activities there weren't a lot of sports, and even before her, you were a cheerleader. That's what you cheerleader for the guys playing sports. Where are we now? My daughter was a scholarship swimmer at Notre Dame. I mean, we have women assistant coaches in the NBA, assistant coaches in the NFL in training camps. Look where we are. And so while the tweeter says it's foreign to Cam, I get it, but haven't we come a ways where the women are so now involved in sports? We talk about when we think there'll be an NBA head coach that's a woman. I mean, I sit there. I played in professional football for 9 years. And when I had to go do local radio in Arizona, I had to cover hockey. I never played hockey in my life. Yet I was looked at as someone, well, he's a pro athlete. Now, I could talk just like Mike could talk like the thought of an athlete, situations, all the things that go. But as far as X's and O's of hockey, do we think that every beat writer maybe getting one of their first jobs is, hey, you're going to go be the beat writer for the hockey team? A guy. Do you think he knows all there is to know about hockey? What you do is you learn that. And to think that Jordan didn't put her time in to learn. So I guess my thought is, isn't that where we're going? It's one thing when my wife, or even before her, couldn't play a sport, but we're in such a different spot right now that comment just seems just so out of place right now. Is it the end of civilization he made that comment? No. I mean, let's not get crazy about that. But it caught me, and you're right about TV. His kind of reaction was, I was like, my thought was really like, Really, Cam? Today, with as much as women are doing today, that's where you're going to go?
But like his reaction, it was normal to him.
Yes, it was.
And
That's
I guess
exactly right.
That's the whole point to your point. Like, we shouldn't look at Jordan differently, because if you're going to look at her as a professional differently because of those things, then, I mean, you should look at Greeny differently like that. What more? I mean, Greeny didn't play the sport that we did at this level.
Right.
But we don't discount Greeny's opinion. You don't discount Bill Barnwell's opinion or any of the other guys on our network who never played a down in their life, because you recognize that that's not the only barrier to entry to this whole thing. And so to do that is basically saying, well, this side has a penis and this side doesn't, and so this side's opinion is more valuable, because to your point, we're not that far removed from what you were talking about there. So this idea that some of those things might be still floating under the current, that shouldn't be foreign. Like, we always want to think we're past sexism and racism, but we're not that far removed from when those things were out on Front Street. Like, when those things were cool and accepted.
I'm not 100% sure we're past it at all, based upon some of the events that we've seen taking place lately. And look, this is not about thin skin. This is about whether a person has the right to go and do his or her, in this case, her job, and be respected by everyone around them based upon how well they are doing it. If she does her job poorly, then she deserves the same criticism that a male would receive in the same circumstance. And if she's doing her job well, then she deserves the same respect that a male would be doing in that circumstance. And to treat her otherwise and to behave as though it was completely natural that she should expect to be treated otherwise is disgraceful. I mean, it's nothing to do with thin skin or political correctness. And I will say this, and I've said this before, that the only time, the closest I've ever been to football was I covered an NFL team for 6 years, 6 seasons of the Chicago Bears, on varying different levels for different media outlets in Chicago in the early 90s. And at that time, there were a small handful of women who were out there covering this stuff every single day. And I've admitted this on the air many times. I saw things in the locker room that were just despicable. I mean, horrible. And I was in my early 20s, and I was scared to say anything about it, and I never stood up for them, and I regret that to this day. But I saw guys purposely dropping towels in front of them and other things. That would be the worst of it, but all kinds of other things, making gestures and things like that behind their backs. And I regret it to this day that I never did anything about it. I was just too afraid to do anything, but it was also, they weren't hiding it. It was so out in the open. It was so obvious. And I will say, for whatever this is worth, I covered all sports in those days. It was much more prevalent in football locker rooms than any other, for whatever that is worth. So the fact that you say that we've come a long way, no, we haven't. Because the way he was behaving makes it obvious that he didn't think there was anything wrong with what he was saying. And it's 25 years later.
Here's the thought of you'd think we'd have come further is I go back to and you know what we were talking about when I was in a locker room, you know, with the anthem protest. You asked me, you know, what happened when you were 25 and in the Eagles locker room, the kind of things that would go on.
Yeah.
Well, I was in the locker room when women first started coming in the locker room.
Right.
And I mean, our biggest concern was, were you going to wrap a towel? Or were they giving us towels to make sure you had one if you wanted one? It wasn't even about what they were going to ask or were they going to break down the game. I mean, it was, oh my God, a woman in the locker room. I mean, it was so foreign to us. But the difference is your generation, Mike, it was completely normal to you. It was completely normal to you that your sister was at Notre Dame swimming and there were these great women athletes that you got to know at Notre Dame and that go on to play professionally as well. That was less for me to see as the norm. For you, it was the norm. So I guess that was my thought and my little bit of head shaking of Cam is he is right in your wheelhouse of you have seen where women have gone in the sporting world and the business world and what they have done and to downplay it, to put it in a box, so to speak. That's what kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I think the sensitivity thing is the one thing that bothers me more than anything because that's like a superficial issue to this too. Like the core of it is that people still think this way, but even for the people that say Cam needs to choose his words more carefully, that crowd says, oh, you're being sensitive. Like, man, if having to change one or two words in your vocabulary or the way you address things, having to put an iota more thought into that offends your delicate psyche, I got news for you who the sensitive one is. Like, that's laughable. That is ridiculous that that's the complaint, that you're the one shouting, oh, look how PC is, or trying to make this a left and right issue. Like, man, this is right and wrong. Like, we try and cover up too many things with that bipartisan BS. Like, eventually it becomes right and wrong. It's a philosophical thing where either you believe that sexism is something that exists and still affects people, or you don't. And I have a hard time finding a gray area in a lot of that. Like, we're all dealing with it to some extent, and we're all trying to be better. I'm not perfect in this area. None of us are. But, man, if you're not at least pointing it out and acknowledging it and admitting that that exists, I got a problem with you.
I'm just taken aback by this. I'm trying to understand the logic of thinking that this is okay. What exactly is your thinking? Do you, whomever it is you are who is saying that, do you not work in an environment where there are people who look different from you, who are different from you in any number of ways? Because that's kind of how we're slicing this thing up now, right? So women, it's okay if you make fun of them for wanting to talk about football, but where does that end? Where does that lead to? So are people who are taking that position, are you working in an environment where everyone is exactly like you? And if not, how can you not understand this? I don't, the person saying this is a political correctness issue or that people are being too sensitive or thin-skinned, in my opinion, are just being completely ridiculous. You are purposely missing the point.
I mean, I'm sandwiched in between a tweeter who, takes Cam to task for this is, come on, Greeny, stop being politically correct. Newton need not apologize for anything. And then another, it shouldn't come as far as an apology. It shouldn't come at all. You guys are overblowing this. You all want players to be themselves and bash them for speaking honestly.
No, well, look, he can be himself,
yes,
and then you respond.
Yes, exactly right.
Read the first one again. I'm sorry, read that first one
The first one,
again.
come on, Greeny, stop playing political correctness.
Okay.
Newton need not apologize for anything.
Okay, so let's play that out to its logical conclusion. So a woman should not be covering football. That's the logical conclusion of what you're saying. Or it is perfectly okay.
Type of a question. Her natural place is not to be covering football in your
right.
mind.
It is perfectly acceptable, would be the logical conclusion to that, to demean a woman for talking about football. So where does that end? Like what does that mean? What else is perfectly, what's his name?
Mike.
Mike, what else is perfectly okay with you? What else would be perfectly okay to demean a woman for doing for a living? I just don't understand.
He tweeted again, not since you talked. He said, this is not sexism, it's PCBS.
How so? How is this PCBS? I really would love, Mike, call us. I'd love to have that explained to me. You're telling this woman, and I read about her because her colleague Scott Fowler wrote a column about how she fell in love with football watching a bowl game one time, and it became her obsession. She went to Arizona State, which has an excellent journalism school, specifically to learn about this, did a bunch of internships, went to Penn State and covered, or a newspaper, I think, in Pennsylvania, covered Penn State football and is now covering the Panthers for the Charlotte Observer. So she probably knows more about football than I do. I mean, you made that point earlier, and I'm not offended by it. I didn't play football. I know a lot about the history of football. I know a lot about the context of football. But this morning, when there was a question about X's and O's, I asked it to you guys because you played it and I didn't. But there was no reason that Jordan Rodriguez knows less about football than I do, and that same idiot Mike isn't going to say it's PC to put me on the air to talk about football.
Because people only care when it comes down to them, and so when you're dealing with a majority in a group of white males that's had it pretty good for a long time, and all of a sudden people start inching closer to you, it gets a little weird and you feel less special. And so seeing another group of people put down probably helps you feel better about yourself. And at the end of the day, we're all pretty self-interested when it comes to this stuff.
Got another tweet that says to me, if I'm not mistaken, the reporter said she wasn't bothered by Cam's response.
No, you're totally wrong.
You are mistaken.
You're completely.
Congrats.
You're mistaken on that.
You couldn't be more mistaken. Yeah. And so I'm actually more upset about this reaction than I am about Cam.
Yeah.
Look, Cam has a right to say and think what he wants,
sure
and everyone then has a right to react to it however they choose to. But this you said it exactly right, Mike. I can't say it, Mikey. I can't say it any better than you said it. This isn't about left or right or politically correct. This is just about right and wrong. I mean, if you are going to accept the notion that it is okay to demean a woman for asking a question about football, to me there is no logical ending to that.
I had a friend say this to me last night as best as you could possibly say it, is most people use that whole party line, that whole system, to basically cover up for their own behaviors. They base their worldviews in their mind off of what a party tells them to, so that they don't have to answer for the things that they harbor in them themselves. So if you're sexist or you're racist and you want to blindly label the defense of that as liberal, conservative, whatever you want, you're doing that. You're putting it on the label so you don't have to put it on yourself in a way that's just just passing the buck. That's all it is people wanting to completely take the blame off themselves and put it on anyone else. And it's laughable. And at some point you get down to what you said. Either you think someone is lesser than you and shouldn't be able to do certain things because of it, or you don't. You think they're equal and you're willing to work through the problems to get there.
It's just amazing all the different.
Is he still tweeting? Is
no,
Mike
no,
still
no.
tweeting
It's just where people, the angle they go. We all have basically agreed here that what Cam said was wrong.
Yeah.
Did we not? And
we say that, but most people don't.
No, I'm with you. Kevin tweets it. This is just an ancillary thing. Cam took the position. Call him out. You guys are afraid to not have him on for an interview. You need to be harder on him. I mean,
okay, so I mean, you can't win with that.
No, you can't. You can't.
Again, I think what Cam said is reprehensible. I do not think that the world stops spinning on its axis as a result of it. The reaction to it actually bothers me more than what he said, because the fact that so many people are, Mike, again, I hate to keep, I'm just going to repeat what you said, but people are projecting themselves into this and trying to pass this off. It's the whole fake news phenomenon that we're living in.
Yes.
Now, something that I disagree with, I now have a way of saying, of trying to completely discount what you're saying. What you're saying, if you're saying that what Cam Newton said is reprehensible, I have a way of discounting that completely. And a lot of people will listen to me and will buy that, and so I don't have to listen to you anymore. That's the only logical ending to this. And again, I would just ask that guy, Mike, where does it go? What else should women not be allowed to do?
No.
What other job should they not be allowed to have?
But to that point right there about Cam Newton and where we take this from him, like Cam Newton is a symptom. He is not the sickness. So you can get mad at Cam Newton all you want, but to your point, seeing all of this pop up, to your point, the reaction should make you infinitely more upset.
I'm just amazed at some of this. Terry tweets in, every week my wife says women shouldn't be allowed. My wife said this. He said his wife said it. Women shouldn't be allowed on the sideline until they play. To Terry's wife, do you know how many people not associated with football that are on the sideline that are men that have never played? That have never played, that couldn't break down anything on the field, yet they're working in the sport and they have every right to? I mean, seriously? What the hell? I mean,
logic in the face of what Greeny talked about, the ability to just say something and have that be an indisputable answer, kind of just makes all of that still the norm.
That's kind of become the response to everything now. Well, you're just PC. Well, you're just trying to be politically correct. Well, you're just trying. This is just fake news. Okay, fine.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
He is in our studio here. Always such a pleasure to have Tim Kurkjian with us talking baseball. Good morning, Timmy.
How are you guys?
Doing well. We're great. And obviously, this is your busiest time of year and best time of year. And the overwhelming story coming out of the two wildcard games is the starting pitching and just how little bit of it we've seen. Jeff Passan had a good tweet that Madison Bumgarner last year in one start threw more postseason innings than all four of the starting pitchers thus far this year. To what do we attribute that, and how much of it do you expect to see as this postseason goes on?
Well, first off, it's just baseball, and this strange stuff happens all the time with no explanation. 7 1/3 innings, 20 hits, 15 runs off the 4 starting pitchers in 2 games. It doesn't make any sense because these are number 1 starting pitchers for their team. So this is aberrant behavior here. At the same time, we should get used to it happening more in this postseason because in the end, you win these days with bullpen in the postseason. And all the rules of pitching in October are changed from the regular season. The Indians made it to Game 7 of the World Series last year because of the way they used their bullpen, specifically Andrew Miller. The Cubs won the World Series last year because of the way they used their bullpen most often with Aroldis Chapman. And we're going to see more of that. And in Game 1 of in the wild card game in the American League, the Yankees went to their bullpen in the first inning, which they had to do. But the point is they have 7 relievers lined up. They brought in 4 closers in that game. One of those closers pitched in the first inning, Chad Green. No one even knows who he is. He's great. He's got closer stuff pitching in the first inning, and it reminds me of what Lance Berkman told me 5 years ago. He said every night someone comes out of the bullpen throwing 95 miles an hour, and I've never even heard of him. That's where the game is today.
So along those lines, I want to ask this one general because I know we want to get into the games. Over time, then, will we see relief pitchers paid more and starters not paid $30 million a year?
I'm going to say no to that, but we're certainly moving in a direction like that. I've heard all sorts of people saying, why don't you just have bullpen games every day? Why don't you just have each team throw 5 pitchers every game?
Kind of like an all-star game, huh?
Like every game.
Yeah.
But it's not going to work that way because ultimately you're going to burn your bullpen out. Meaning the way Andrew Miller was used in October last year, if you tried to use him that way during the regular season, he would be done by June the 15th. It doesn't make any sense. You still need a starting pitcher or two to go out there and say, I'm going to give you 7 or 8 and give those guys a rest. But for the most part, and mostly in October, get used to seeing bullpen after bullpen guy coming in because they throw like this.
Mike and Timmy Kurkjian. So since the beginning of time, and certainly as long as we've been doing this show and you've been coming on with us, we've been handicapping these playoff series and saying, well, the edge in Game 1 is here and the edge in Game 2 is here. And we generally always look at these postseason matchups based upon the starting pitching. Do we no longer do that?
I don't think we do that nearly as much as we used to. Now I think we look at what does the whole game look like? Who is available out of the bullpen to come in the 5th inning and relieve this guy? But we still have great starting pitching going. Look at what we have today. We have Sale and Verlander today. We have Corey Kluber going in Game 2 now. Do you guys know how good Corey Kluber is, how good he's been, certainly since
He's
June
going to win the
1st.
Cy Young, right?
Yes, he's ridiculously good, and nobody can hit Chris Sale when he's right. And Justin Verlander has had a renaissance here where nobody has hit him in the month of September, and we haven't even gotten to Kershaw yet and some other people who are going to come out throwing.
But so I'm sorry, Mike. But so that leads. So the first game today is Boston and Houston, and again, you got these two legendary pitchers: Sale, who was the Cy Young winner up until the middle of August, and Verlander, who is who he is. When the 7th inning starts tonight, will either of them be in the game?
I think they will, because as much as we say this is bullpen stuff, if you have a great starting pitcher, you ride him as long as you can. They're not going to go get Justin Verlander in the 4th inning of this game, and the Red Sox aren't getting Chris Sale this early. The Twins had to do that because Irvin Santana wasn't very good, and a kid pitched that game for the Yankees, and he wasn't very good either. Maybe those guys weren't ready for this. I promise you, Chris Sale is ready for this, and so is Justin Verlander. So this thought that they're coming out early, they don't want that to happen. They just have to do it sometimes.
So one last thought on that. I'm sorry, but so if that wasn't a winner-take-all game, Greinke doesn't come out of that game when he does, is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying, is that they had to get through that. But the problem with the Diamondbacks is they brought their Game 2 starter, Robbie Ray, into that game. So they used their 1 and 2 starters to get through the wild card game, and now they're going to be at some sort of disadvantage as the Dodgers have this already lined up with their starters.
But that's what we want. I mean, the wild card team should be at a disadvantage, right?
Precisely.
I mean,
and
that's
anyone
kinda how
who
it's supposed to work.
complains about it, sorry, just win your division.
Listen,
and you don't have to deal
I'm
with
with
that.
you. I mean, it's working how it should work. I'm with you. So while my Indians are maybe the Las Vegas favorite to win, the Dodgers have the best record, would you be surprised at any outcome in any of these 4 series as far as upsets are concerned?
No, I'm not surprised by anything ever anymore, especially this year. Fellas, we had 10 teams go to the playoffs. I honestly thought 8 of the 10 could not only go to the World Series, but win the World Series. Tell me another sport where 8 teams go to the playoffs and you think they can win. You can't say that in the NBA. It's usually only 2 teams in that league, and I love that league. But in baseball, especially this year, there are so many interesting teams out there. They all have a flaw here and there, but they all, if they hit it right, are going to be really hard to beat. But I think the Indians are the best team in the postseason. But does that mean they're going to win? No, that doesn't mean they're going to win. This is baseball, and who knows what's going to happen the next month around this game.
Unfortunately, in basketball, actually, you may have made one more than they have.
Yeah.
There's actually only one team
Might
probably
be one
that can
team
win
at
it.
this point.
Mike
Yeah.
and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. All right, so we have Timmy for just a second here. So they begin today. Red Sox and Astros, as mentioned, great first game matchup. Where do you see the advantage in the series?
Well, the advantage goes to the Astros because of the way they swing the bats. They led the American League in runs scored. They had 11 guys hit 10 or more home runs this year, which means they have 2 power guys sitting on the bench because they're not good enough to start a postseason game. That's how dynamic they are. They just went 4 games in a row, winning each game by 9 or more runs. No team has done that in the modern era. That's 1900 on. This is how dynamic their offense is. Bob Melvin, the A's manager, says you can't match up with them. You can't bring these bullpen guys in and say, all right, we have the advantage here. You never have the advantage over the Astros. And in the month of September, they just steamrolled people. So they have to have the advantage from an offensive standpoint.
So I guess same question with the Yankees and the Indians, that bullpen for the Yankees, which you saw do, and going up against those Indian hitters.
Right, the Indians' bullpen is tremendous. The Yankee bullpen's a little bit better. So that's going to be a bullpen series, certainly on days where Corey Kluber doesn't pitch. But the Indians' offense is demonstrably better than the Indians' offense at this time last year. And with Edwin Encarnacion in the middle and now Francisco Lindor hitting leadoff, they're not an easy team to pitch to, no matter how well you pitch.
And I have to let you go because if you're late for SportsCenter, I'm going to get yelled at. So just big picture, National League, if you had to pick one out of the 4, who do you like the most?
Well, I like the Dodgers the most because they have their pitching lined up, and because they were 55 games over 500 at one point this year, it's absurd. But they're the strangest 100-win team in the history of the sport. No team has ever won 16 out of 17 and lost 16 out of 17 in the same season. The Dodgers did that. They're only the second team ever to lose 16 out of 17 in a season and finish above 500. They finished with over 100 wins. It doesn't make any sense, but I think they've pulled this back together, and I'll make them the team to beat in the National League.
And the last quick one for me, because I know you do weird stuff on the Le Batard show, so this shouldn't throw you. Do you think Gary Sanchez double cups today?
I would triple cup today.
There you go.
Right.
Okay. Nothing phases you anymore after being on
I'm wearing a cup
right
right now.
Yeah,
I just cover the sport. Right.
Too well played. All right, Timmy, run
Thanks,
to
Timmy.
SportsCenter because if you're late, I'm going to get in trouble.
You're
Thank you
not
very
going to get
much.
in trouble. Thank you.
Always great talking baseball with Tim Kurkjian in our studio here. We'll take a short break and back with much more. Hey, use my joke. I say that all the time.
Yeah.
I wear a cup when I cover the game.
Herb Street's $1 million moment brought to you by Eckridge and the road to the National Championship sweepstakes. Visit EckridgeFootball.com for your chance to throw for $1 million at some of the biggest games this season. Now, here's Herbie breaking down Michigan State.
Now for this week's $1 million moment brought to you by Eckridge. Michigan and Michigan State in Ann Arbor. How many of you out there remember what happened the last time these two teams got together in Ann Arbor? Last play of the game, the block punt. Of course we remember. Michigan State finds a way to win. So I want to see if there's kind of revenge on the mind of Michigan this time around. Michigan off of a bye week, chance to get healthy, and Michigan State with a very, very impressive win against Iowa at home. Maybe kind of establish some confidence before they go into the big house. For any time Michigan and Michigan State get together in a rivalry game, always must-watch TV.
Listen, it definitely is. Always physical games. Now, I did see Michigan State. There was a nice win against Iowa. Against Notre Dame, they turned the ball over early in that one. Then Notre Dame ended up running a lot on them, but they 3 turnovers turned into 21 points for Notre Dame, so it was tough to get a handle on that Michigan State team in that game. But they're not good enough to overcome turnovers like that. Not many teams are. Some can. They can't. So that obviously is going to be key for them to have it more of a clean game. This isn't one of the better Michigan State teams I've seen over the last number of years, so they certainly can't afford those type of mistakes. And are we still trying to figure out Michigan? I mean, you got the backup QB in there, the defense, tough defense. They've been in some close, tough games, where they've pulled away some at the end. But do we kind of have an idea, an identity about them yet?
I feel like Michigan is on upset alert in the beginning of the third quarter and at practically every one of their games, and then they wind up winning by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
Someone, I forget who it was yesterday, made a good point. That Ohio State losing, who was it that was sitting there that said this? Ohio State losing to Oklahoma changed the entire perception nationally of the Big Ten. It was Will Kane who said it. Because all of a sudden people are selling short all of the Big Ten teams. They haven't played anybody. They haven't beat anybody. They're no good. And I think all of that stems from the fact that Ohio State got blown out.
Blown out by Oklahoma. Right.
And
after they blew them out last year.
The exact reverse took place.
Exactly right.
So we'll see. Most of the important stuff in the Big Ten hasn't happened yet. Mike, let's read a couple. I want to address this tweet one more time from Matt, who says the 73-win Golden State team without Durant is not the same team as now. And I would agree with the notion that if they lost Durant, they would not be my favorite to win the whole thing. And you said, well, they're still the same team they were a couple of years ago. You're pretty close to right.
They're pretty close to being that team.
But I think other teams have gotten better.
That's
I think
true.
This arms race that has been created by Golden State, and particularly by the addition of Durant to Golden State. So now Houston, look at Houston with adding Chris Paul. Look, obviously, at what OKC has done. Cleveland fortifying themselves. So it's not so much about Golden State getting worse as it is about a lot of other teams getting better.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. If Durant was out, would they win or lose?
The championship?
Yes.
I believe they would not win.
All right. Any of the other three?
That was going to be my question to you. Could they afford to lose any of the other three?
Yeah.
The first one you would mention, of course, is Steph.
Right.
Who is like right now, trying to quantify the greatness of Steph Curry is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I think you would be split up somewhat evenly amongst people who say he's one of the top 4 or 5 most valuable players in the sport, and some who would say he's kind of along for the ride in that mix. Not maybe that's overstating it.
Right. I know what you mean.
But that there are 10 guys in the league more valuable than he is, when he is a 2-time MVP as recently as 2 years ago. So do you believe they could lose Steph and still win the championship?
I think they could lose one of the other three and still win the championship, losing one of them and still having 3, including Kevin Durant.
But I think that Durant is the guy that they could not lose.
I agree.
Mike and Mike, and all the Twitter reaction, as always, comes through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed.
Yep, we're reminding you that if you want to get in touch with us, tweet us at Mike and Mike through that 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. This weekend, win on the field and at home with bouquets from 1-800-Flowers.com. When you order a dozen multicolored roses for $29.99, you get an extra bouquet for free. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. So I don't know what to do with tweets like this. Clay tweets at us, "Sorry, guys, don't tell us how to feel. I don't want to hear a woman call a man's game. Turned the baseball game off the other night because of it." I really don't know what to say to that. I don't either, because if you're talking about, I'm sure it was when Jessica Mendoza was on. She's fantastic. She was doing the game with Aaron Boone. They were both calling it. She's great. I mean, so I don't know what to tell somebody like that. We see women involved not only playing sports more and more, but coaching sports and being educated on sports. I mean, it is just so foolish. I read another one that said 90% of women couldn't go over a football route. Well, how many men couldn't either? Okay? I mean, you know what you're doing? You're overstating a lot of men's intelligence about the game of football, if you want to be honest about it, about actually breaking it down. You know, there were times we'd have beat reporters come in and try and ask football questions, and you'd think about chuckling a little bit, and these were guys. You know, so to sit there but I from the women's side, I understand where they've come, the long way they've come to right now, but that's why I guess I would have noticed that out of a guy Cam's age. He's right in the wheelhouse of women exploding onto the scene now in everything, and just being, from corporations to sports, so much more involved in it. To sit there and kind of laugh it off because she talked about a route is amazing to me, is amazing. I bet I could quiz a ton of you men out there who think you know, but you know what? You don't know if we really got down to it and actually started talking X's and O's in football.
What's more significant is she does. So 90% of females, is the tweet here, don't know what football routes are. Guess what? 90% of females also wouldn't know how to prosecute or litigate a case in a courtroom. And the other 10% are lawyers. And that's true of men and women. 90% of women wouldn't know how to operate on a patient, and the other 10% are doctors and surgeons. I mean, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
This is just it's not a question of bashing. It's just a question of being a human being. You're either a human being or you're not. And in all candor, if your perspective on this is, I don't want to hear a woman talking about this, then you're just a jerk. I don't know what else to tell you. You're entitled to your feeling. I'm not telling you not to feel that way, but recognize that most normal people think that you're just a jerk and a loser, and that it probably speaks a lot more about you than it speaks about anybody else. Let's move on.